Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today. Drop your city in the comments. Where are you tuning in from? I want to tell you about the night my life fractured. It wasn't a slow break, it was a detonation. It happened in the middle of Savannah's annual Founders Day Gala, at the most coveted table in the old pink house, the one right next to the ballroom's grand fireplace, reserved for generations for the Vance family. I was walking toward it, a giddy, 52-year-old woman in a new emerald silk dress, ready to take her seat as the matriarch. But my son Thomas, my sweet, brilliant 30-year-old boy, intercepted me. He didn't just put his hand up, he shoved me back, his eyes dead cold. "Mom," he snapped, his voice carrying just enough for the surrounding tables to hear. "This table is for the family. Get outside." My breath hitched, the air knocked out of me not by the shock, but by the sheer public violence of his rejection. I could feel the 100 eyes of Savannah society burning into my back. But before I could manage a choked-out why, my late husband's sister, Aunt Clara, a woman whose sharp edges usually kept me at a distance, grabbed my arm. Her elegant face was a mask of cold fury, but her whisper was pure terror. "Eleanor, don't say a word. Don't cause a scene here. It's worse than him being cruel. They've been hiding this for years. They're trying to take the house." I'm Eleanor Vance. For 25 years, I was the quiet anchor of the Vance family in Savannah, Georgia. We aren't old money, not exactly, but my late husband, Richard, inherited one of the most beautiful and historically significant homes in the historic district, a property that meant a lot to the city's narrative. My passion and my livelihood was my little antique store, the Southern Relic. I specialized in authentic pre-war pieces, and I poured all my time, my heart, and frankly, a good portion of the family's liquid savings into making it a success. My flaw, I realize now, was mistaking a quiet life for a safe one. I had spent so long cataloging other people's past that I completely failed to watch my own future being dismantled. My daily routine was a rhythm of comfort. I'd be up by 6, sipping sweet tea on the porch, watching the moss sway before heading to the shop. Thomas was my whole world since Richard died 5 years ago. He was a successful attorney, a partner at a good firm, and I was immensely proud of him. He'd recently married Serena, a woman 10 years his junior, all blonde Polish and saccharine smiles. I'd dismissed my uneasiness about her as typical mother-in-law paranoia. Now I see it as a warning sign I fatally ignored. The subtle red flags were woven into the tapestry of my everyday life, easy to overlook. There were the hushed phone calls Thomas would take, always stepping out onto the porch while Serena watched me with an unnerving, calculating stillness. I chalked it up to his demanding job. Then there were the small, inexplicable drains on my savings account. 10,000 gone one month, 15 the next. I'd convinced myself it was a bookkeeping error, a complicated tax payment I'd forgotten about. The biggest flag, the one that should have screamed, was Serena's intense focus on the house. She wasn't interested in decorating. She was obsessed with its legal history. She asked more questions about the deed, the original survey lines, and Richard's business partner from decades ago than she ever did about my antique store or my memories of Richard. I remember standing in the shop one afternoon, dusting a mahogany chest, when the first real tremor hit. I'd found a receipt tucked deep inside Richard's old office desk, a sizable payment to a PI dated 6 months before he died. When I'd asked him about it then, he'd just waved it off, saying it was a business matter, just following up on an old investment. Now, as I stared at the blurry faxed receipt, cold knot formed in my stomach. The man's name he'd investigated? Elias Thorne, the same man Richard had nearly bankrupted in a legal fight over this very house 40 years ago. Thorne was a ghost from Richard's past, a cautionary tale. Why had Richard been looking into him? I felt the floor of my peaceful life begin to crumble. Aunt Clara's desperate warning at the gala propelled us into a frantic investigation. Clara, who runs the legal aid clinic and is one of the sharpest paralegals in the county, became my unlikely ally. The day after the gala, I met her at her office, a cluttered space smelling of old paper and lukewarm coffee. I confessed everything: the missing money, Serena's obsession with the house, and the PI receipt with Elias Thorne's name. Clara's eyes narrowed as she pulled up public records. "Ellie, you were right to trust your gut. Thomas wasn't just being a cruel son. He's been leveraged." She showed me a series of property transfer documents, all prepared in the last 3 months, all signed by Thomas in his capacity as an attorney. They were complex, serpentine legal maneuvers designed to quietly shift the ownership of the historic Vance property into an offshore holding company. The final signature needed was mine, obtained either through forgery or, more likely, coercion. "They needed you out of the picture, Eleanor. The house is the legacy. It's worth over $6 million, Clara explained, tapping the screen. "And look at this." She then pulled up a faded newspaper clipping from 1982, a society scandal. Elias Thorne, a rising real estate mogul, lost a bitter lawsuit to Richard Vance over the property's title, a legal loophole Richard had exploited. Thorne lost everything and left Savannah in disgrace. "And now for the kicker," Clara said, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. "Serena Thorne, not Serena Vance. Her maiden name is Thorne. She's Elias's granddaughter." The revelation hit me with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't just infidelity or common greed. It was an elaborate generational act of family revenge and financial deceit. Serena had married my son, seduced him into a life of debt and luxury he couldn't afford on his own, and then, using his legal skills and my own trusting nature, had plotted to reclaim what her grandfather felt was stolen. She was a Trojan horse, and my son, Thomas, was either a willing accomplice or a pathetic pawn. I started digging deeper, my antique store becoming a temporary war room. I found the common thread for the missing money: large payments from my account to Thomas and Serena's joint account, quickly drained into a series of high-risk offshore investments they'd hidden from me. It was all a scheme to leverage me out of my share or force a quick sale. Thomas's debt was real, and Serena had engineered it, using her family's decades-old grudge as the justification. The snap at the gala wasn't just spite. It was Thomas's final, desperate attempt to publicly shame me into silence, ensuring I wouldn't interfere with their last, crucial step: obtaining my signature on a deed transfer. The betrayal felt like a sickness, a chill that went straight to my bones. I spent 3 sleepless nights, clutching a cold cup of coffee, staring at the evidence. Bank statements showing the withdrawals, emails between Thomas and Serena discussing securing the final asset, and Serena's online profile, a masterclass in deception, complete with fake family ties. I felt vulnerable, broken, but the shame Thomas had tried to inflict, the sight of all those faces watching me, hardened my resolve. I was Eleanor Vance, the owner of the Southern Relic. I knew the value of heirlooms, and I wasn't about to let my family's legacy be stolen by a ghost from the past. I was going to fight fire with Southern charm and legal steel. Clara and I worked on the plan, a strategic counter-move designed to expose the depth of their fraud and exploit Thomas's ethical breaches as a lawyer. We engaged a specialist in white-collar crime and property litigation. The plan was simple. The exposure had to be public, undeniable, and hit them where it hurt most: their reputation and their legal standing. The opportunity came a month later, at the Vance Family Heritage Celebration, a minor but mandatory social event held at the Savannah Historical Society. It was Serena's chance to solidify her position as the new lady of the house. She'd even tried to dictate the menu, an insult to years of Vance tradition. The Heritage Celebration was held in the Society's Grand Hall, all chandeliers and marble. Serena, draped in pearls, looked smugly triumphant, holding court with a group of Thomas's law partners. Thomas, however, looked pale and sweaty. He'd barely spoken to me since the gala, dodging my calls and emails. As the Historical Society's president began his introductory speech, Clara, positioned near the AV setup, gave me the smallest, almost imperceptible nod. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my hands were steady. I stood, not near the head table, but in the center of the room. I didn't shout. I projected, my voice clear and controlled, seasoned by years of talking to customers about precious, delicate things. "Excuse me," I said, a polite, firm Southern voice that cut through the polite murmur. The president paused, and all eyes, including Thomas's horrified ones, turned to me. "I apologize for the interruption, but before we celebrate the Vance family legacy, I believe it's time to talk about what that legacy actually is and who is trying to steal it." I didn't wait for permission. Clara clicked a button, and the large screen behind the speaker, meant to display a slideshow of the family's history, suddenly displayed an image. It wasn't the house. It was a scanned copy of Serena Thorne's birth certificate, next to a photo of Elias Thorne. The caption was simple: "The true heir of the Thorne grudge." A ripple of confusion and then utter shock ran through the room. Before Thomas could lunge for the screen, I continued. My gaze locked onto Serena, whose practiced smile had finally cracked, replaced by sheer panic. For a year, Serena Thorne, granddaughter of Elias Thorne, has been operating under false pretenses, using a long-ago family feud to marry my son and orchestrate a sophisticated title fraud to illegally seize the Vance family home. Then, Clara shifted the screen again, displaying the damning evidence: the bank statements proving the misappropriated funds, followed by the complex legal documents Thomas had drafted, detailing the offshore transfer scheme. The final image was a screenshot of a text message from Serena to Thomas, where she gloated, "The old fool will sign anything once you tell her it's what Richard would have wanted." The silence was deafening, the kind that suffocates. Then, the explosion. Thomas sprang up, shouting, "Mom, you're insane! This is libel!" His face was blotchy red, but his denial was weak. Serena, however, was immediately calculating. She grabbed his arm, whispering something furious, and tried to flee, but a few of the society members, already dialing their phones, had blocked the door. The murmurs turned into gasps as Thomas's law partners swiftly backed away, their faces a mixture of professional horror and social disgust. The exposure was complete: financial fraud, ethical misconduct, and a betrayal rooted in a 40-year-old vendetta, all unfolding in the most public forum in Savannah. Within minutes, the police, alerted by Clara, were there. The aftermath was exactly what I had wanted: public, swift, and legally binding. Thomas was immediately put on leave by his firm, facing serious disciplinary action and a potential fraud investigation alongside Serena.